Survival is not just about staying alive. It's about finding hope, healing, and strength. This is The Survivor's Voice. I'm your host, Angie Sedor. Before we begin, this episode may contain discussions of trauma, abuse, or other sensitive topics. Listener discretion is advised. We don't recommend listening to this show with young children present, and we encourage you to prioritize your well-being. Today on The Survivor's Voice,
when I want something, I always figure out a way to kind of get it. I think both of us really thought this was like the last time we're really going to see each other. Did I deserve to go to prison? Who knows?
Yeah.
Did I need to go to prison? Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today on The Survivor's Voice. We are really excited because who we get to interview today, and it's one of our partners, Dan with Wise Media, and it's who we share a podcast studio with. We are very fortunate to have met him because he has generously allowed us to use his equipment, and we wouldn't even have a video podcast if it wasn't for Dan Wise. So we're excited to hear his story because he's got an incredible story to tell us. Thank you so much for coming on to our show. We're really grateful.
Thank you for having me, and I love sharing the studio with you guys, and I really love what you guys are doing, so couldn't be happier.
Let's just dive in. Kind of tell us what you do today and, kind of what your life looks now, and then we'll kind of dig into your past.
We have a podcast studio where we run our own podcast, Wise Media Studios and Federal Prison Time Consulting with RDAP Dan, and then we try to rent it out a little bit to other businesses, entrepreneurs that want to come in and kind of do what you guys are doing. But for money, I'm a prison consultant. I work with people that are under federal indictment, under federal investigation, people that maybe have just gotten sentenced to federal prison. So we work with them on sentencing mitigation tactics, what they can do to potentially shorten their sentence before they go to prison, and talking about like mental health, substance abuse, family and support, children, kind of everything you can imagine somebody deals with before they go to prison.
Yeah. I'm sure you have some sort of history with prison. So let's just first start with what was your relationship with your mom and dad? What was your childhood like? Walk us through that.
Childhood with my parents. It wasn't bad. It was more non-existent. My parents were older when they had me. My dad was in his late 60s. My grandfather was born in the 1800s. Because of that, there was a lack of relationship. My parents got divorced when I was real young. My mother was an overnight nurse, but she was also, I didn't know at the time because I didn't really have a grasp of what drug addicts look like, but she was a pretty big pill addict with sleeping pills, tranquilizers. So when she was home, she wasn't really there. And then she would go to work at 7 p.m. and work overnight. And I was pretty much home by myself. My father was an alcoholic, pretty bad alcoholic, and apparently he was also pretty abusive. Never to me, but I guess he was towards my mother. And I remember the day when it just all came down. I don't know if I came home from school or woke up, but they were screaming and she was punching him in the back and kind of pushing him out the door. And that was the last time he was ever at our house. I wasn't really big on seeing my dad. He was supportive when it came to financial stuff, child support, taking me clothes shopping or giving me his credit card to go clothes shopping. But there wasn't really, I wasn't like, hey, I'm going to go bring my friends to my dad's and have a sleepover.
What did he do for a living?
He had a couple of Getty stations, which are Texaco stations, gas stations.
Oh, yeah.
He had some Getty oil stations in Connecticut, which I don't really remember. My parents had a car wash in Connecticut, a Christian bookstore my mom ran.
Really?
Which sounds like I came from money when you hear about it like that.
It sure does.
By the time we got to Florida and my parents got divorced, me and my mom moved into a trailer park. And I don't know if the money got spent or if my dad just wasn't giving my mom money. I don't know what it was, but there was never food in the house. It was basically, I remember sardines, peanut butter. That was pretty much it. Maybe a couple cans of soup. We didn't have money to go on vacations. So it was just hanging out with our friends and throwing rocks at cars, a lot of mischief type stuff. My mom, she didn't work at this point. She was a stay-at-home something. I don't know what she was doing.
Do you feel like the child support money maybe was going towards a drug habit or something like that?
Probably, because my mom, she was definitely addicted to tranquilizers, and whatever those were, I don't know. When I hear tranquilizer, I picture somebody taking out a deer. So I don't really know what a tranquilizer is other than pills. She got a part-time job working at Winn-Dixie, which is kind of your local grocery store chain. And she hurt her back. She fell or something and sued them. She got a little bit of money, 10, 15 grand, or maybe more. I don't know what she got. And it was gone before the money hit the bank account, money was gone. Her car was still getting repossessed. I mean, she didn't pay any bills with it. I was constantly trying to figure out ways her mortgage wasn't getting paid and the house was constantly up for foreclosure. So she would just kind of tell me in the morning before I'd 16 years old, before I'd go out the door, she's like, oh, if we don't get like $700 by the end of the week, we're going to lose the place, lose the house. My car's going to get repossessed. So I was constantly trying to figure out ways to come up with money to give her.
You kind of sprinkled a little in that you prison consult.
Yep.
How did you get into that and why?
My mom had a job as a nurse and she was working for this older guy, this really, really wealthy guy. He had a younger wife who had a son about my age. So my mom used to kind of drag me over there to make me be friends with this kid because he had nobody to hang out with. And my mom was just trying to kiss ass. Colin was my age. And he was just kind of like this, at the time, I saw him as like this goofy, nerdy Christian kid that went to a Christian school, private school, didn't really have any friends. And kind of fast forward after a couple of weeks after being over there, he ended up being we ended up kind of like becoming best friends, like brothers. So I spent months at a time at his house. So I got to grow up in a country club, riding golf carts, driving, BMWs and Vipers and Mercedes and just doing all the fucking things that rich kids got to do. But I remember kind of, because we were friends for years going through high school together. And I remember we were sitting at the country club eating lunch, and I don't know what hit me, just like the reality of this isn't really my life. I'm kind of like living another life right now. And I was thinking to myself, there's going to come a point where the only way I'm going to be at this country club is if I'm like working, bussing tables or a waiter. I'm not just going to have the luxury of just let me go charge it to my room. I had a taste of that lifestyle.
Oh yeah.
And you can't just turn that off.
No.
And I was like, what the fuck am I going to do? I don't have any real education. I dropped out of school at this point. So I got into sales and I was selling everything from vacation packages, just anything you can imagine selling, telemarketing mostly. I kind of excelled through the chain and became like management and stuff and started getting manager positions and glorified manager positions, a little easier money. And I started hearing these guys talking about this doctor's office they were going to open up. The guys that own the call center were talking about how they were going to open this doctor's office in Savannah, Georgia. But they were talking about how the guys doing in Boca Raton, they're bringing in like $1 million a month in revenue and it's all profit. And, they're trying to build this up. And I was like, what? And I kind of started hearing dollar signs. So I started going to Sean and saying, hey, what is this thing you guys are talking about? So I just kept implanting myself into the conversations and started learning a little bit more about what they were doing. And I realized there was something shady about it, which you knew out of the gate just because of the guys that were running it. These weren't like, these weren't like corporate, these were guys that you don't say the wrong thing to because you get killed. So Lou, one of the main guys, the financier of the whole thing, was like, we could give Dan a job. He could run the office. He could be the office manager. And he's like, how about 10 grand a month, pay all your expenses. We'll pay for you we'll pay your housing plus $10,000 a month. And we'll pay for you to travel back to Florida every weekend. Cause I had to move to Savannah to do this. We'll pay for you to travel back to Florida every weekend so you can see your kids. And I was like, what's the catch?
Yeah.
And it was just, they're like, oh, you're good with people. You don't have a drug problem. You're not going to steal from us. And we can teach you all the medical stuff. Cause I knew nothing about medical. My girlfriend, me and Shelly were together at this point, and I was like, I can't leave her behind. Like, give her a job too. So they agreed to bring Shelly on for, I think it was like $750 a week, me 10 grand a month, all my expenses. And I was like, let's go. That never happened. Like I never got the money, there's just things didn't work out. And it came like kind of fast forward. It was a pill mill. It was if you know what pill mills are, they're doctors' offices that primarily their whole focus is people that are seeking Schedule II narcotics like oxycodone, Percocets, basically legalized drug dealing. They're just looking for doctors to turn a blind eye and write prescriptions for opioids. And we knew something was wrong when I got there, just because a lot of patients, we were in Savannah, Georgia. Patients were coming from Kentucky and Ohio. They're driving hundreds of miles to come see this doctor. And they'd show up in like a minivan where 10, 15 people would get out of the minivan.
Oh my God.
And they just looked every bit of
like
either
strung
out, homeless, just decimated, just horrible condition.
Wow.
But then one person would come in for all of them, like a representative. They would call them sponsors. They'd come in and they'd pay for all of their doctor visits. So he'd come in and drop, $1,000 for all the people. And then apparently when they'd get their prescription, say they got, 120 oxycodones, they'd get half their prescription to the sponsor, and then the sponsor would take it back to Kentucky or Ohio or wherever, and he would sell them on the street for drug money.
Wow.
And I guess $20, $30 a pill. And a lot of these people that he would take, they were people that qualified for like Medicare and stuff. So insurances would cover it 100%. That's when I started to feel grimy though. When I was there and I would see these people get out of their cars and they would have kids, because a lot of these people didn't have babysitters.
Oh my gosh.
So they were dragging their like 4-year-old kids, the worst kids in the world, you know, because they have no parental guidance. Not that they're bad kids, but they're just raised.
No structure.
No
discipline. Yeah.
No shoes, fucking dirty, look like they haven't eaten. We were going next door, buying them burgers and stuff. So yeah, so it only lasted a couple of months. And then one morning we were starting to open another office. They sent me to Atlanta, Georgia, which is about 6 hours away from Savannah. And every morning, Shelly and my best friend were still in the Savannah office, but every morning Shelly and I would talk on the phones. And this one morning, she didn't answer the phone on the way to work. I didn't think anything of it. And then I called Constantine, and he didn't answer his phone either. And I still didn't think anything of it. But then Sean, one of the owners calls me up and he's like, hey, have you spoken to Shelly or Costa? And I said, no. He goes, I can't get a hold of them. And I tried to log into we had an IP camera system where you could log in virtually to the cameras.
Yeah.
And he said, I can't log into the cameras. So we couldn't really figure out what was going on because neither one of us were there. So I called the hamburger place next door, Fatso's. And me and Tony was the owner of Fatso's Burgers. We kind of became friends. So I called Tony and I was like, hey, Tony, this is Dan. Before I could finish my sentence, he's like, bro, where are you? There's like 50 federal agents out here and they're looking for you.
My gosh.
I was like, what? I was in shock, but I didn't jump to I wasn't terrified because in my mind, I was like,
you're not doing anything wrong.
I didn't do anything wrong. I was still convinced, even though it was sketchy as fuck, that what we were doing wasn't illegal because all these people had valid MRIs and all this stuff. So I didn't think it was illegal either. I just thought it was unethical at best. So I'm thinking, what the hell's going on? I decide I need to go there. I need to go to Savannah. So I realized I couldn't cash my check. The bank accounts all got seized. I couldn't cash my check. I didn't have any money on me. So I went back to the office in Atlanta that I was helping open. And because we had a safe that I had accommodation due. So I took the money out of the safe. It wasn't a lot in there. It was like maybe like three or $4 grand in the safe. I put it in my little travel bag. I got back in the rental car. And before I could pull out of the parking lot, there was a tap on my window. It was just a guy in civilian clothes. And I was in a rental convertible. And he's like, Dan? And the way he said my name was like he knew me. And I just assumed maybe it was a patient that had met me in Savannah that just saw me. And as soon as I said yes, guns were drawn. They were DEA agents.
Oh my God.
Drug enforcement task. And get out of the car. So they swarmed me. They arrested me on the spot. They went through my suitcase. They asked me if I had any drugs on me. And I had like an eighth of marijuana in my suitcase. So they arrested me for the marijuana. So ultimately, got indicted out of Savannah, Georgia, 52 count indictment. Every prescription that the doctor wrote from the time we were open, which was only a couple of months. So every prescription he wrote, they charged me with that many pills. Conspiracy to distribute narcotics for non-legitimate purposes. Yeah. They didn't think that I was, they knew the doctor was writing the prescription, but they knew they were pretty sure that I had a good idea what was going on, which tied me to the conspiracy of it, that I conspired to facilitate this drug operation. I guess technically not knowing anything about a conspiracy then, yeah, I did, because I had an idea that something fucking shady was going on, and I kept doing it.
Yeah.
So that's how they indicted me, and they indicted all of us. They indicted everybody. Shelly, Costa. I mean, from the doctor to the guy that we hired to be security. I told you they came and arrested me in Atlanta. Well, the way they kind of got more information was before they sent me to Atlanta, or about a week before they sent me to Atlanta, Sean calls me and says, hey, we're going to be renting a new office in Atlanta. And the guy that owns the building that we were going to rent, the one that I was at the day I got arrested, that building, the guy that owns that building, his son wants to come and see our operation in Savannah to make sure it's the type of operation they want to have in their business. It's the kind of patients are coming.
Yeah.
So he said, I can't be there that day. And he's like, can you meet with them and just kind of like fluff it up, tell them you're an investor, tell them you're a part owner, tell them whatever you want, inflate the amount of patients we see because they want to know that we can pay their bills there. So this guy comes in, he's like, oh, show me. So I'm showing him around and he's like, oh, how many patients do you guys see a day? And I was like, like 25 or 30. And the reality is when we first opened, like the first couple of days, we saw that many because of the marketing.
Yeah.
But by the time this took place, we were seeing like maybe 5 or 6 patients a day. I told him I was an investor, that, oh yeah, I put my own money into this. It's a great return, all this bullshit. And he kept saying, is there any way I can see your doctor? Is there any way I can see your doctor? I hurt my back. And I was like, do you have an MRI? And he said, no. I said, well, you can't. You can talk to the doctor, but he can't do anything for you without an MRI. And then he said, can you introduce me to your doctor? So I said, sure. So I introduced him to Dr. Gossett, and he's talking to him for a couple seconds. And within 15, 20 seconds, he's asking the doc, any way you can write me a prescription? And Dr. Gossett said, I can't. I'll lose my license if I do that. Because I can write you a prescription for an MRI, and you can go get an MRI. And if it shows there's something wrong with it, then yeah, I can see you. And of course, he wasn't going to do that because he was an undercover agent, which we didn't know at this time. But as we're walking out, he was like, yeah, I left my prescription in Jacksonville. I was like, oh, what do you normally take? And I think he said like Percocet or oxycodone. Now, the patients that we would see throughout the day, they'd come in a patient room, we'd examine them, and we'd go clean up the room when they leave to get it ready for the next patient. Sometimes they drop stuff. It could be money. It could be whatever. You'd find pills from time to time that fell out of their pocket.
Yeah.
So we'd go put them in a pill bottle and we'd stick them in the back. So I think we had like 2 or 3 pills just in the back.
Yeah.
So when he said that he left his prescription, I was like, oh, I have a couple here you can just have.
Oh, God.
He's like, oh, how much do you want for them? I said, I'm not going to sell them to you. I said, just meet me outside. So I went outside, gave him the pills, and he's like, oh, I appreciate it. And he left. Well, he was an undercover Chatham County narcotics officer. It made newspapers, Chatham County News, Savannah News. I didn't make it to my local news because I lived in Florida. So nobody in Florida really got to see any of this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was fucking terrifying, man. When they finally arrested me and they brought me in, I'm still thinking, oh, they're just going to release me. I was looking at 20 to life. It was maybe 3 weeks before like trial, and my attorney calls me. I'm back in Florida. This is like, now years have gone by. This started in 2011, go to 2013. That's how long this has been going on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just because it's how long it takes them to build the case.
Yes.
Offer plea deals. Nobody was taking the plea deals. So my attorney calls me up one day. He's like, hey, we got to change our game plan. Going to trial is not really an option anymore. I'm like, what do you mean? Because everybody on this case except you and Shelly took a plea deal. I was like, so what? We didn't do what they said. I mean, we didn't do what they said we did. So it doesn't matter. Everybody, part of their plea deal, everybody that took a plea deal states in their plea deal that part of the plea deal is they have to testify against anybody that decides to go to trial. And part of their testimony is saying that whoever goes to trial, they had to say that they knew that we knew what we were doing when we took the job, which wasn't true.
No.
But that's what they're all going to say. And you're talking to a jury. And if you've ever been summoned to be on a jury,
shoot.
they don't summon people that have been in trouble before.
Yeah.
So you've got all these like goody two shoes, churches, teachers, nurses. And I didn't want to take a plea deal. He's like, look, if you go to trial and lose, you're looking at, you may not get 20 to life, but you're sure as hell going to get 10, 15, probably 20 years. Because there's a 52 count indictment. So every pill that the doctor wrote a prescription for, they were charging me with that many pills. Now, if I took a plea deal, they're dropping the 52 count indictment to 1 count, but it carried, they capped my sentencing. They couldn't sentence me to more than 60 months, which still sounded like a lifetime to me. So I was still in fucking denial, and I was freaking out, and I was losing my mind, and like, oh my God, like how is this? It just your life is, when I say turned upside down, like, it's an understatement. Every time my phone would ring and I would see a 912 area code, my heart would, because 912 is Savannah, Georgia, my heart would just drop, because weeks would go by where I didn't hear from my attorney, and I'd go to this delusional thought of, they forgot about me. Yeah. Once the medicine kicked in, not the medicine, but the reality, and you really just have to kind of like, you're forced to look at your options now. Like, I can stay in denial and go to trial and get my ass handed to me, or I can suck it up and take a plea deal. And, even if I get the worst case scenario at that point, 60 months, 5 years, I'm in my early 30s, you're going to get good time in the feds. I didn't know about all the programming at this point, but I knew you could serve a little bit lesser time. Okay. And you come to the conclusion of, you'll still have life left. I'm not going to be like 80 years old when I get out. So eventually just said, okay, taking a plea deal. And Shelly, she took a plea deal too. They wanted her to cooperate against me. They wanted her to, her attorney kept telling her, you need to leave Dan, because it's not looking good for you. And, looking back, she probably should have. They probably would have left her alone. But we didn't understand how it all worked, how broken the justice system was at that point, because we're like, we're not bad people. Right. We made some bad choices. We didn't think it through all the way, but we're not horrible people. And this is what I've learned is really good people make bad choices every day, and there's severe consequences for them, not to escape responsibility. If I to do it all over again, the red flags were there, the warning signs were there. So yeah, I took a plea deal, and Shelly got sentenced about a month before me. And we were convinced, everybody on our case was like, oh, Shelly's getting probation. They couldn't even charge her with conspiracy. They charged her with a charge that's called misprison of a felony. When they don't have enough to get you on a conspiracy charge, it's like the lowest form of a felony charge they can charge you with. So they used that to tag her in it. And then they sentenced her to 11 months federal prison. When they gave her prison time, the rest of us, like, we're all getting the book thrown at us. No kidding. So that's when it became real. Because we went to court that day, like no big deal. We drove from Florida to Savannah, me, her, and her mom. When she got sentenced, the drive home from Savannah back to Palm Beach County was just like, what the fuck just happened? Of course, I'm trying to be sympathetic because my girlfriend's got sentenced, but I'm like, I'm so fucked. Wow. You can't help but think about yourself in a situation like that. She had to self-surrender. think it was August 11th of 2011. And I was supposed to surrender September 23rd, 2011. So I drove her to prison. She went to the same prison as me, just the women's section of it. So I drove her to Coleman Federal Prison in Ocala, Florida. I think both of us really thought this was like the last time we were really going to see each other because we knew my sentence at this point. We knew I went to court.
Okay.
And I got sentenced. I didn't get the 60 months. I got 42 months. So the judge did come down a little bit, but still we were looking at 11 months with good time is like 8-9 months. 42 months with good time is still like 36 to 40 months. There's this big discrepancy in time. So we didn't discuss that. We just figured, we're just going to pretend like everything's going to be fine and whatever's going to happen is going to happen.
Yeah.
So comes time for me to surrender. I go to prison. Once I took my plea deal, I got in and I pled guilty to 42 months. About a week later, I had to meet with U.S. probation where they do what's called a pre-sentence interview, where they create a pre-sentence report based on your mental health, substance abuse, life history, finances, everything.
Yeah.
And they ask you about your substance abuse. And they asked me if I use any drugs or drink. And I said, I drink on the weekends. I said, I don't do drugs though. And my attorney said, I need to talk to my client. So my attorney took me out in the hallway and he said, hey, Dan, didn't you say you smoked weed? I was like, yeah, but I don't want to tell him that. It's going to get me in trouble. And he's like, no. This is really
this
like
is the time that you want to tell him.
They're really talking about before you went to prison or before you took your plea deal or got indicted. Did you have any drug abuse? And I was like, I smoked weed. He goes, I'm not going to tell you what to say. He goes, there's a program in prison. He goes, I don't know that much about it, but you might qualify for it, but you got to tell them that you smoke weed. I went back into the probation offices and I was like, yeah, I've got a huge weed problem. He's like, you do? I was like, yeah. He goes, how often do you smoke? I said, every day, which is true. But it was like one hit of weed.
Sure.
And he's like, but I just said, yeah, I smoke weed every day. He goes, and do you feel like, I was like, yeah, I'm worried about not having it, how I'm going to function. So he put that in my paperwork and that technically qualified me for RDAP. When it comes time to self-surrender, we go several months later, September 23rd, September 20th, 2014, 3 days before my self-surrender, I was just having this like mental, I don't want to say a mental breakdown because I never really broke down, but I was having just anxiety about what prison was going to be like.
Oh my God.
From what I've seen on TV, Shawshank Redemption, the TV show Oz, Locked Up Abroad, getting beat up, raped, extorted, all these things. So I took to YouTube and I jumped on YouTube and no intentions of starting a channel or anything like that. I just posted a video. My name's Dan Wise and I'm going to federal prison for 42 months and I don't know what to expect. And I just kind of told my story from my current perspective at that point.
Yeah.
And that was the end of that. Forgot I even made the video. So it comes time to turn myself into prison. And, two of my friends drive me to prison. I've got the prison costume. I'm not wearing it at this point. She's in the car. And the night before prison, I had to pack my house up and which was a whole nother fucking weird, surreal thing. It's like packing the belongings up of a dead person. But two friends that helped me pack up that night spiked my beer with Molly.
Oh my God.
I'd never done Molly before. And I didn't want to do it. They asked me if I wanted to do Molly before they came over that night. And I was like, no, I'm good. So when I wasn't looking, they put Molly in my beer and like 30, 40 minutes later, they're like, hey, how you feeling? And I was like, I'm feeling great.
Right.
And as soon as they asked me how I was feeling, and when I realized it, I was like, oh, what'd you do? I got like, oh, so you're going to be fine. And honestly, it was a great night.
Sure.
Considering I was going to prison, I had the best time ever.
Yeah.
But the next day was very rough. My serotonin was depleted. I felt like fucking suicide.
Yep.
Now I had to drive 6 hours, not 6 hours, like 3 hours to Ocala. And I'm in the car. And as we're pulling up, they're like, all right, you're going to put the prison costume on? Come on, man. You said you were going to do it. I'm listening to the voices and I'm like peer pressure. And I'm like, all right, fuck it. I'm that guy. So I put the costume on and I grew up this gnarly beard. And Coleman Federal Prison is the largest prison in the United States. It's got 2 penitentiaries, a medium security, a low security, and a women's camp. And each one of those facilities, like just where I was at, houses like 3,000 people.
Oh my God.
So this is like 20,000 inmates at this prison. So there's a perimeter truck that drives around the whole perimeter, making sure no packages are brought in. And he comes up, he's like, can I help you guys? And I was like, yeah, I'm here to surrender. And he's like, you're gonna go in dressed like that? Yep. And all I remember him going, good luck. And he said it with like this way where I was just like,
oh God,
that doesn't sound very good, but I'm already committed. So we go, we hit the buzzer, they let me in. And it's kind of like walking into like a front desk. There's like a big desk in front of you. You hand him your ID. And he was really nice. He's like, have a seat. My 2 friends came in with me. He's like, hey, you guys come in, have a seat. So they looked like they didn't want to come in, but they did.
Yeah.
So we were there. It felt like forever. And it's probably literally like 2 or 3 minutes. And off in the background, there might as well have been WWE intro music with smoke and fog. And three giants are just walking my way. One giant black guy and 2 giant white guys. I'm talking, these guys were probably every bit of 6'5" each. And they're coming up, and as they get from like maybe me to you, I stand up out of the chair and I put my hands out like this. I'm like, you got me, coppers. Because I'm still putting on a fucking show for my friends.
Oh my God.
This motherfucker, when I say he snatched me, it was so fast and like lightning, and he brought me in and he brought my face to his ear and he goes, you think we're your fucking friends, faggot? And he's whispering this in my ear, and he looks at my 2 friends and he's like, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it's like, get the fuck. Before he could finish his statement, I turned around, all I see is like a door closing. Like they were poof, gone. He ripped the costume off me, like just shredded it off me. Just like it was like not even buttoned on there. And they threw me in a drunk tank kind of a thing, and they drug tested me to see like what kind of lunatic comes in dressed like this.
Oh shoot.
And I tested positive for fucking meth.
Of course, because of the Molly.
Apparently Molly's has meth in it. And of course I tested positive for weed. So they're telling me, oh, we should put you in the medium and all this. And I was like, I don't know what the fucking medium is.
Yeah, what is that?
Medium. I was like, okay. Like they're not getting any kind of reaction out of me. It's not because I was like a tough guy. I was just a fucking zombie right now.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. Oh, you think you're tough? And I was like, no, I don't. I want to go to sleep is what I want to do.
Oh my God.
So they drug tested me, they swabbed me, and then they brought me into general population, and they put me into a observation room where they could watch me for a few days to make sure I wasn't going through withdrawals or anything like that. Then after like maybe 4 or 5 days, I heard wise to the lieutenant's office. And I spring up out of my bed. And I remember inmate going, I don't know what the fuck you're smiling about. They don't ever, it's not like you're going to get a fucking award.
Oh my God.
You're not going for a good reason. So I'm like, oh shit. So I walk into the lieutenant's office. I put my hand out to shake his hand.
No.
Goes, I'm not shaking your hand, faggot. He goes, you do pills? You'll suck dick for pills in here. And I was just like, I don't suck dick. I don't do pills. I didn't even know what to say.
Oh my God.
Know? So he's just like, we're going to be watching you. So they sent me back to regular general population now. So now I'm just in the regular inmate yard with regular guys. And they came up to me, and the guys came up to me like, where are you from? What's your name? Dan, West Palm Beach County, or Palm Beach County, West Palm Beach. What are you in for? And I was like, yeah, I've seen this movie before.
Oh no.
I was like, I don't want to talk about it.
Oh my
God.
God.
They're like, okay. So he walks away. Another guy comes up. What's your name? Where are you from? What are you in for? This happened like 3 or 4 times. And finally, the original guy came back up to me, and he's like, hey man, you fuck with little kids?
Oh my gosh.
I was like, what? I was like, no. I was like, why would you even ask me that? He goes, you don't look like a gangbanger. You don't look like a drug dealer. You don't want to talk about your crime. And the only people who do that are your snitches or child fuckers.
No kidding.
I was like, oh my God. I was like, I worked for a doctor overprescribing fucking pain pills. So I had to get my paperwork. I had to get what's called a J&C.
They didn't believe you.
No, because I should have went to a camp. Somehow it looked like I never went to court. They gave me a failure to appear.
Oh no.
Yeah. Which I didn't know this. I found this out because now I'm in prison finding out what I can do to shorten my time. This is when I start hearing about RDAP. And so I go and I'm a candidate for RDAP. I've got the substance abuse in my PSR because I said I was a fucking weed head or whatever. RDAP was going to, this now, after I got approved for it, we go weeks forward. RDAP is going to start on a Monday. It's Friday. I get called to Dr. Smith, that's the RDAP coordinator. She's like, Mr. Wise, I got some bad news for you. I was like, what? She goes, looks like you're not going to qualify for RDAP. I had told my family I'm getting a year off. And I was like, why? She's like, oh, this other case for this pill. And I was like, no. They null process that. They dropped the case. She's like, well, you have to get the paperwork. I'm like, it's fucking Friday. RDAP starts Monday, and you guys are just now telling me this.
Oh no.
She's like, I don't know how we didn't see this. And you could tell she was generally sorry.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like she was gonna cry. She was like she wasn't a civilian, but she was a psychologist that worked for the prison.
Okay.
So she treated us like humans. So I could tell she was excited for me to be in the program because she's like, this guy's gonna skate through this fucking program.
Yeah.
And then when she had to tell me I couldn't get in it, I think it was as painful for her as it was for me. So I go back to my dorm, and I'm just like, I'm in survival mode right now. I'm in hustler mode.
Yeah.
Like, turned on full, like full head. Nothing's going to stop me. So I go to my case manager, Mr. Jimenez, and I'm like, hey, he goes, what do you want? And I told him, he goes, there other people have problems. We'll talk about it Monday. I said, Monday's too late. If I don't get into the program by Monday, I missed the cutoff, and that's it. He goes, everybody's got problems, Mr. Wise. Have a nice day. And like, wouldn't do anything about it. So I'm accepting defeat in my mind, not accepting it, but dealing with it, and just like rage. I go back to my bunk, and my bunkie Josh, he was like, oh, what's going on, Wise? And I was like, dude, like, I don't want to talk about it, this, and this. So I get up my bunk, and he's like, man, I know you're not a religious guy, but that woman every week, she was always sending you like books, religious books. So my best friend, Matt, the one that convinced me to wear the prison costume in.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
His mother, she would send me every week, she would send me a religious reading and something like Tony Robbins.
Okay.
Something just mindful. But I was anti-religion. Like I was like, God's fucking phony. And that wasn't because I was in jail. I thought this before going to jail. I was like, God's full of shit. The Bible's some piece of shit book that people read because their lives are so fucking shitty that they need to like believe in some magical man in the fucking cloud. That's like the way I looked at it. And Josh knew that because we used to have like debates where he would try to talk the word to me, but never like preach at me. Just kind of like talk to me. He's like, you're so funny, Wise. You're so funny. One day you'll see. I was like, Josh, that you thinking you're going to see is why you're sitting here in prison, idiot. Where's your God now? He goes, oh, he still got me, man. You just don't know. I'm up in my bunk and he's like, man, she's always sending these books, da, 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 da. And he tosses the Bible. And I'm telling you, it goes, it landed on my chest. I was so gone right now because I was like, I got to tell my family I'm going to do another year. My kids, I got to tell my kids I'm not coming home for Christmas. And I already told them like, oh, I'm getting out. And I was embarrassed to pray because I was like, my ego was like, oh, God's phony, God's fake, da, 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 da. So I'm holding this Bible and I don't even know what, like I felt like this chill come over me. And I've never prayed before because I always thought praying was like, I'm going to ask for, please God, fix my life. People always pray when their life is down and out.
Yeah.
They want God to come fix their shit. And
right.
Like God's not just going to come fix your life and then you go fuck it up again. That's not how, you don't just pray when things are inconvenient for you. And I remember whispering it like, God, if you are real, I'm not saying you are, but if you are real, I'm not asking you to fix this for me. I'm not asking you to get me an RDAP, but fuck man, right now I just want to die. I'm asking you to like, give me the strength to deal with what's coming next. If I got to do this extra time, just help me fucking deal with that. It's something about just saying that, even though it wasn't completely out loud, it was kind of to myself. It was like this calming, just, and I fell asleep immediately, just fell asleep. And then, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 minutes went by and Josh was hitting the top of my bunk. He's like, Wise, Mendez is calling you. And I mean, You're zonked.
Wow.
I was like, hopped out of the bunk, almost fell because I was like stumbling. And I walk in there and he goes, what do you need? And now, mind you, it's about 2:30. No, I'm sorry. 3 or 3:30 at this point. Told them I had this charge. I went to court for it. They dropped the charge because the feds picked it up, but they filed the paperwork wrong. It says I have a warrant and I don't. I went to court. It's like, my attorney can talk to you. He goes, but I just found, he goes, why are you bringing me this team? He goes, why are you telling me this now? I was like, I just found out right before I came into your office. They just told me. I didn't even know this existed.
Yeah.
So he's like, he thinks I'm lying because he doesn't. He's like, you want me to call down? I want him to call the clerk's office in Gwinnett County. He's like, if I call down there and I find out you're lying, he goes, you're going to pay for this. And he wasn't kidding. So I was like, I'm not lying. Even though I wasn't lying, I don't know what they're going to tell him. They might be like, no, he has a failure to repair. He's lying. He calls down there. He tells them what's going on. They're like, no, he has a failure to repair. We see it here. He goes, can you pull his docket? So she's like, hold on. You could hear it in her voice.
Oh, gosh.
She's like, it's going to come back and tell you she's like, it's not going to say anything different. So she goes and does it. She comes back and I'm telling you, like, time stopped. I'm just watching the clock.
Oh, God.
She goes, oh, looks like, it was no process. Da, 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 da. And he needs it faxed over. She's like, she goes, I can fax it over Monday. And he's about to go, okay. And I'm like, all right, I have the hustler to me. I was like, I have to just.
Was there like a time limit on that?
Yeah,
day?
had to be in. I had the paperwork had to be signed that day.
Oh my God.
For me to get in Monday morning.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, it has to be today. He's looking at me like, I'm like,
how dare you?
He goes, I'm sorry. I was like, I'm sorry, but you don't understand. Like, if it's not today, I don't get in the program. And he's like, is there any way you can do it today? And he's looking at me with this like stone cold killer face.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And she's like, what's your fax number? So it came over. And then he's got to tell Dr. Smith. So her shift ends at 4. He calls the phone over there. She doesn't answer. He goes, looks like she left already. I know all of the staff members have to carry walkie-talkies with them 24/7 because there's an emergency button on there in case a staff gets attacked. They hit a button and it boom, the staff swarms on them. I'm like, she's got a walkie-talkie on her. And he goes, you want me to call her? I was like, she might not be out of the building yet. Dr. Smith talks to everybody. Dr. Smith, Jimenez to Dr. Smith. Hey, Jimenez. Oh my God. He goes, where are you at right now? She's at R&D. That's where they walk out. That's where they turn in their stuff, turn in their walkie-talkie and their keys, and that's where they leave and get like guns or personal belongings and walk out. She goes, on R&D. He goes, I've got Wise in here. She goes, what? Oh, Daniel Wise? And the way she like remembered me. He's like, yeah. She's like, oh, so sorry. She's like, no. He goes, no, we got it fixed. But paperwork, I guess, has to be filed today. And you could hear like, she wanted to go home too.
Oh my gosh.
She's like, tell him to meet my office in 5 minutes. That was it, man. I got into RDAP and I immediately, thank you, God.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know what it was, but I was prepared not to go, right? I was ready to accept it. And God works in serious ways. I'm not going to say it's going to work like that for everybody. You got to pray. You got to ask for forgiveness. You have to put it out there and be willing to accept what comes next. And he opened that fucking door, man. And I kicked it down for the next 10 months.
That's amazing.
Served 13 months and 42 months. Kept my promise to my kids. Got home. That's how I became religious. I'm not like religious, but I realized I was angry and didn't want to. I didn't want to admit that maybe my way wasn't working. I was like, my way or the highway, and being objective like that, opening yourself up to serenity and just giving in, realizing I need help. And that's what it took. So the prison consulting, to kind of jump forward to like how prison in so many ways ended up being, a blessing in disguise. And that video that I posted on YouTube before I went, so I said, I'm going to prison for 42 months. I don't know what to expect. I forgot I made that video. And I'm sitting in the federal halfway house, just like going through whatever motions. And I had this little shitty computer in there. And I checked my email for the first time. And I saw a YouTube comment. Like, what are these YouTube comments? So I clicked on it. It was that video. I was like, oh shit, I forgot I made this video. It was all people getting ready to go through something similar. They were under federal indictment, under investigation. What was it like? Are you out yet? We have so many questions for you. So I had all this free time on my hands. So I started making response videos on YouTube, just talking about what I could have done different, how I almost didn't get into RDAP, things I wish I had known. And then the following grew really fast, really like it went from like a couple hundred people to a couple thousand, like overnight. And then in about 6 months after just making these constant videos, criminal defense attorneys, federal criminal defense attorneys, private attorneys started reaching out to me, asking me if they could hire me to outsource me for their clients, to prepare them, not just for like what prison life is going to be like, but RDAP, like they knew not like all the stuff that I almost didn't do, like the PSR, like the attorneys didn't know how important any of that was. Oh my
God.
That's what I do full time now. And it turned into a full-time gig. And, it was really, really good. It's just, I'm slightly burnt out on it because now we're in 2025. So I've been doing it since 2016 and I'm reliving
a long time,
just reliving my prison experience over and over and over. I want to move past it now too.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm taking all the negative energy from people and I'm filtering it through me to push it back out positive. And it is a great service that's needed. I just feel like the torch needs to get passed to somebody else. And I don't want to carry that burden around forever. So yeah. Time for something different. Prison itself wasn't that bad. My prison experience was overwhelmingly positive.
It changed your life for the good.
Changed my life for the good. It gave me a new set of ways to look at things, hold myself accountable. Taking responsibility has probably been the biggest one on, did I deserve to go to prison? Who knows? Did I need to go to prison? Yeah. If you want things to change in your life, it's not going to happen overnight. You have to look at, if right now, if you're fighting to get your kids back, you've got to figure out what the short-term goal is tomorrow to create your long-term goal. You're not just going to have all the answers tomorrow, talk to God.
Yeah. Awesome.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Being vulnerable with us, Dan. Next week on The Survivor's Voice.
I ultimately found myself laying on the floor, not knowing what I was going to do, how I was going to survive what I was going through. You're so broken.
Yeah.
We don't even know you anymore. He did take all of my childhood fears, but not just to me. He did it to our daughters.
Thank you for joining us on The Survivor's Voice. I'm Angie Sedor, reminding you that every survivor's story matters, including yours. If you or someone you know has a story to share, you can contact us at booking@thesurvivorsvoice.net. Your voice deserves to be heard. If you enjoy the survival stories we share, we would love it if you gave this channel a follow and a 5-star rating. No matter how dark the journey, the light of resilience shines brighter. Thank you for listening. If you know someone who would benefit from hearing this story of survival, please share this powerful testimony with them. A heartfelt thank you to our incredible listeners for your unwavering support and to the survivor community for your courage and resilience. You are the heart of this podcast. Special thanks to our producer and editor, Christina Elder, and to Dan Wise with Wise Media Studios for bringing these powerful stories to life. Your dedication makes the Survivor's Voice possible.